Hello. Bonjour. De la part de la Fondation Rideau Hall et du Forum des politiques publiques, je vous souhaite la bienvenue. On behalf of the Rideau Hall Foundation and the Public Policy Forum, I would like to welcome you to this afternoon's event. We are excited to have the chance to meet the new faces of innovation in Canada. My name is Sophie Nadeau. I'm the National Media Lead at Edelman Canada, a marketing communications firm with offices across Canada and around the world. Our guests this afternoon were honored this morning at Rideau Hall, where Governor General Julie Payette presented them with the Governor General's Innovation Award. Let's welcome them in now. Nos invités cet après-midi ont été honorés ce matin à Rideau Hall, où ils ont reçu le prix du gouverneur général pour l'innovation. Accueillons-les chaleureusement maintenant. Dr. Tom Chow. Ernie Daniels of the First Nations Finance Authority. Mary Gordon. Dr. Kamran Khan. Dr. Xinghua Chu. And the Memorial University research team made up of Dr. Terry Ling Young, Dr. Sean Connors, and Dr. Kathleen Hodgkinson. Malheureusement, le partenaire du Dr. Chu, le Dr. Gary Cobinger, n'a pas pu se joindre à nous aujourd'hui puisqu'il a été appelé en République démocratique du Congo pour aider avec l'épidémie Ebola. Mais on aura l'occasion d'en parler davantage plus tard. Thank you to each of our laureates for joining us this afternoon. We can't wait to get to know more about you and about the work that you've been doing to improve the lives of Canadians. We will be welcoming each of you to the stage in turn to talk about your accomplishments, your trials, and tribulations. And then we will turn to a panel where we will invite all of you back up here to talk about Canada's culture of innovation and to take a few questions from our audience here in Ottawa today who are eager to learn more. I should mention that this event, of course, is being live streamed and live tweeted online, so hi to everybody online, by the Public Policy Forum. And we welcome you here in the audience to share your thoughts and comments on social media as well, using the hashtags noted on the back of your program and inside, notably hashtag GG Innovation. Before we get into our discussion with the laureates, I would like to introduce you to Julie Caffley, the Senior Vice President of the Public Policy Forum, who will offer a few opening remarks. Julie.
Merci Sophie. Bienvenue. Ça me fait plaisir de vous accueillir ici parmi nous cet après-midi. Merci. On est en compétition avec le soleil et le marché bail, donc merci d'être parmi nous. I'd like to start off by acknowledging that this event is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, and thank you for allowing us to be in this space. Thank you to the Rideau Hall Foundation for co-presenting this event with us, to Scott Haldane, and to his fantastic team, including Barb, Kate, and Jill, who we've worked closely with in developing this event today. And I'd also like to give a special shout out to the team at the Public Policy Forum that's brought this event together, led by Andre, Carolyn Husvini, and our communications team, Carl, Jonathan, and Nashin. And of particular note, all of you have a copy on your seat, is the beautiful publication. And I'd like to highlight Nashin, who's sitting back there behind the pillar, who did the beautiful design of this keepsake publication that I'm sure our laureates will be sharing with aunts and uncles and brothers and sisters and friends and neighbors, because it's beautiful. And quite a special keepsake, and a special thanks to Mary Gooderum, who has written up the real stories behind these very impressive honorees that we're celebrating today. For those of you who don't know the Public Policy Forum, we're an applied policy shop. We're based here in Ottawa, and we do work from coast to coast to coast, looking at issues of importance for our country. And we're delighted to be associated with the Governor General's Innovation Awards in terms of trying to highlight those stories of innovations and really what we can learn from these innovation stories. So it is our pleasure to be a part of that. I'd now like to pass things over to Michael Denham. Michael is the President and CEO of BDC, the Business Development Bank of Canada, Canada's only bank devoted exclusively to entrepreneurs. He leads a team of 2,200 people across Canada, looking at building and growing resilient businesses, and a huge focus, obviously, on entrepreneurship and innovation. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Denham to the stage.
Bonjour tout le monde, c'est un plaisir d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui. Julie, merci, et Sophie aussi, à vous, merci. Et c'est tout que l'innovation est importante pour le Canada. C'est un moteur de prospérité de notre croissance économique ainsi que nos bien-être. Alors aujourd'hui, c'est très important parce que dans ce contexte que, en fait, c'est Laureate. And I was with you this morning at Rideau Hall Foundation, Rideau Hall, and I just want to say how it was a tremendous morning. And frankly, how humbling it was for me and for so many of us to hear your stories and all the perseverance and the tenacity and the focus and the hard work over so many years to accomplish what you've accomplished. And it was also very inspiring to hear of those accomplishments. I mean, you're literally doing things that are saving lives, doing things that are making a huge difference around the world, doing things to invest and support communities, doing things to enable people to communicate and find their voices and enhance the quality of their communities. So it was a fantastic morning, and thanks as a Canadian for all the things you've done to innovate and make such a difference in the world. And we need role models. And today is important because today is frankly all about understanding your stories, sharing your stories, having Canadians hear your stories, because in hearing these stories of the next generation of folks will emerge and do the types of things that you've done to make such a difference for quality of life here and around the world. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to tell your stories because they're tremendous. Now, as I listened to what you had to say this morning, and as I saw your videos, it just reminded me more than ever how strongly I believe in the fact that building a culture of innovation, it's everybody's responsibility. It's not the responsibility of researchers or universities or entrepreneurs, it's everybody. Now at BDC, we're in a fortunate position where we work with over 50,000 entrepreneurs coast to coast, all shapes and sizes, all industries, all locations, literally from St. John's through to Victoria. So our focus is on entrepreneurship and backing entrepreneurs, but we appreciate the value of innovation, frankly, in all of its dimensions. So Tom, Mary, First Nations Financial Authority, Cameron, Gary, Terry Lynn, Sean, Kathleen, you're not only exceptional innovators, but as I said, you have the potential and are already inspiring so many Canadians to follow in your footsteps, innovate, make a difference. So again, on behalf of do. And again, I saw enough today. My due diligence is complete, so I'll be outside with business cards afterwards. So if you need money, loans, equity investments, I'll be waiting for you outside, okay? And lastly, let me just thank the Public Policy Forum as well for facilitating today's discussion. It's a great opportunity to learn, find out new things, share new ways of innovating. So I'm looking forward to today's conversation because I know it'll allow us to talk about innovation in so many different ways. And Sophie's going to lead the great conversation. We'll talk about what's inspired these innovators. We'll talk about the obstacles they faced. We'll learn more about some of the challenges they had to overcome. So it should be a great discussion. And thanks, everybody, for being here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Denham. We appreciate your remarks today and for BDC's being here. So now we'll turn to the interview portion of today's event, and I'll invite each of the laureates up to sit with me, and we'll have a chance to learn a little bit about what brought them to today. And we'll have about 5 minutes for each of the laureates, which is really a very short period of time. So I have my friends at the back of the room who will tell me when we're at the 5-minute mark, so then we can wrap that up. And then once we're done all the interviews, we'll have a panel discussion about innovation in Canada. So I'll first, if you want to sit here with me, I'll turn this mic on. If everybody can hear me. I'll let you go right in the middle. Yep. We were just saying he's got the lucky, he's the lucky first. He's been lucky first all day, is that right?
That's right.
I'm sorry. Okay, so first of all, if you could just tell everybody the basics. Who are you, what do you do, and how did you get to today?
Well, my name is Tom Chow. I'm the Vice President of Research at Holland Bloorview Kids Rehab Hospital in Toronto. We are a pediatric rehab hospital, and we have research institute of 20 scientists, all focused on childhood disability.
And so what you've done, basically, is you've allowed some children to basically communicate in a way they've never done before. Can you explain the nature of your innovation?
Well, the innovation is not one, I guess, single solution. It's a whole suite of solutions. And the underlying philosophy that we've had all these years is that the child is okay as he or she is, and the onus really is on technology to adapt to the unique abilities of that child. So that's a philosophy we took very early on. So we've never dismissed the potential for a child, regardless of how complex their conditions may have been, to be able to express themselves at some point.
I was reading through some of the information about you before this event, and I think in your books as well, you'll have more too. I thought it was really interesting. You said at one point in one of the interviews that we tend not to listen to the body. We tend to be disproportionately focused on speech. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. What have you learned about sort of the things that we're missing and the work left to do to really hear and listen to each other?
Well, I think everybody knows about body language, and there's a scientific term, pragmatic competence. There's a whole other side of communication that we might not be in tune with because we are able to speak, and so we may not take the time to listen. And we found very early on in our research that the body is actually communicative in so many ways in the absence of speech and gestures. And many families that we've worked with have been telling us this for many years, but it was very hard to find any evidence to support, those kinds of, anecdotal claims. So we, through technology, we've been trying to create pathways through which these children can use their bodies, and whatever those unique abilities may be, to communicate and express themselves.
That's really extraordinary. Can you, before we wrap up our chat, can you tell me a little bit about the reaction that some of these kids have had and parents have had as they interact with this technology that you've given them to change their lives?
Well, I think, it's always a really touching moment when a child first communicates. I don't know for sure because I don't think we've ever asked that question in our research studies, but I think for some of the children it's like, see, I told you so, right? Because it's just some of the things they tell us right away, and I think there's tremendous relief on the side of the family, and because the child can now direct their own care. They can tell teachers what their preferences, they can communicate.
So moonshot from here we go.
Well, I always say that, I hope in the near future we'll be able to equip all children and youth, regardless of ability, with a means of communication. And I think that dream is not too far away.
It's amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, Ernie Daniels, you're the next victim. Jim, you want to sit here? Not. He's on BC time, he was telling me. So we need to be extra nice, yes?
Yes, kind of lunchtime right now.
Almost lunchtime, okay. So as we did with Tom, if you could start with, basics. Who are you? What work do you do? And how the heck did you get here today?
I'm Ernie Daniels. I'm Cree and Dene descent from the Northwest Territories. That's where I was born, raised, and educated. Became an accountant by luck, or by, I don't know. But I'm the president of the First Nation Finance Authority. I've been doing that for about 7 years. My predecessor, Deanna Hamilton, the visionary behind this. So I just followed in her footsteps. So what we did is we created the path to the capital markets for First Nation governments. Up until our organization came into being in 2006, we operate under federal legislation. First Nations didn't have access to the capital markets. So most of their borrowing was short-term and higher interest rates. And so it was long, painful, to get to where we were. It took us that would be 25 years now.
Wow. I think he holds the record amongst all the laureates for hanging in there, right? I think we've agreed on that today.
Oh, yes.
So, but you really, what you do is you're lifting Indigenous communities, right? And you're fueling their work, their dreams, their passion. Before this, we were talking about an example of how this kind of funding can transform communities. You talked to me about a community in Alberta. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, Siksika, Alberta, and is located near Calgary in Alberta. It's a large First Nation community. It was affected by the flooding that happened in Calgary a few years ago. So the school, actually, an elementary school in the community, was really deteriorated. There was mold, there was a lot of things wrong with it. So the way the Government of Canada funds First Nations for infrastructure is on a pay-as-you-go basis. So whatever is in the budget, they will allocate to infrastructure. And it usually goes to need, and if you can't, you don't have the means to build this type of infrastructure. So in Siksika's case, because they're well managed, well organized, they do have a source of revenue. It would have been 70 years that they would have had to wait before they can build their school. So with working with us, they were able to leverage their own source revenue and build a school, a state-of-the-art school, on time with their own design, and it officially opened about 1.5 years ago.
That's amazing.
Yes.
So before we send you back to your chair,
Yes.
You've been at this for a while. You're not done yet, are you?
No.
What comes next?
Well, we're going to continue doing the same. There's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be done in our community. There's about a $35 billion deficit in infrastructure deficit in First Nation communities across the country. So we are actually actively working very hard at closing that gap, but we need some help. So we're working with the Government of Canada to see if we can actually use some of their infrastructure dollars to leverage that into the markets and monetize it over a period of time and build many structures today with today's dollar, not tomorrow's inflated dollars.
So he's not done yet. Look out.
Yeah.
He's coming to see you. Okay. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Mary Gordon. Hi. How are you doing?
Grand. Thank
Grand.
you.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. We didn't practice before because we were going to go with the flow. Yes, this is the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's start with who you are and what brought you here today.
I'm Mary Gordon, and I'm the founder and president of the Roots of Empathy organization, which is a charity, not-for-profit.
Okay. And I think, can we hear the mic okay? Is everything all right there? No? Is this, yeah? Maybe we'll try it up. So tell me a little bit, your organization is unique in the sense that you're trying to drive human behavior, change in human behavior. That's a hard thing to do. So tell us, how do you get that job done?
Well, we work with children. They're not just part of the future, they're 100% of the future. So where do you find them? In countries that are developed, they all go to school. So we go to classrooms in elementary schools, and we're tackling the problem of breaking intergenerational cycles of violence. And when you're a child, that looks like bullying and aggression. So our system, you're getting me in stereo, I understand now.
She's powerful like that, it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we do is we work with a parent and an infant who come into the classroom along with the Roots of Empathy instructor and a curriculum. And over the course of the school year, the children in the classroom are coached to observe this little baby. How is this baby feeling? What are the baby's expressions, vocalizations, and how can we connect to the vulnerability and the humanity in that baby so that the children can then understand and connect to themselves as well as one another, that they become emotionally literate because we're learning through the baby. And the whole trick is to develop empathy, which is my big aha moment some years ago when I realized that the common thread in all kinds of aggression and violence in the world was the absence of empathy. So we are predisposed to empathy, but it really is cultivated in that first year of life in parenting. So when you bring that model of love into the classroom, and when you try to understand a very vulnerable human being, all of the children develop affective empathy, which is their emotional development, and cognitive empathy, which is perspective taking. So their behavior changes, which is what you asked. They become dramatically less aggressive. Bullying very near disappears. And they become increasingly socially and emotionally competent. And this lasts over time because we do a lot of research.
Do you think it would work on grown-ups? I know a lot of grown-ups who could maybe...
Well, I could be a very wealthy woman if I took up all the offers for middle management. Right. But I've decided, they have other ways of going about this. Yeah, we've been invited to prisons, and, it's quite normal that, ministers of justice in other countries, we're in 11 countries. We've had many invitations, but we've kind of decided that we have our best bang for the buck to start with little children. And there are other solutions that other people can offer.
How are we to retain our sense of hope in a world where, I think I'm on Twitter a lot, so maybe I'm disproportionately affected, but how do we hold on to our sense of hope in a world that, it is difficult. We're at a difficult point, I think, right now. We would all acknowledge the work you do with children is unbelievable. What would your advice be to grown-ups, though, who, may be feeling like, it's not going so well?
Stop and listen to the children. There is hope springing eternal in children. They have the most generous spirits. Children see possibilities. They appreciate the dandelions. So I think we would all be very hopeful because, the developmental health and wealth of our nation and our happiness rests on the breath of the children.
That's great advice. Hard to ignore that advice. Let's put that on Twitter, yeah?
Okay.
All right. And so what does the future look for you? Like, what is your moonshot? You're not done yet, clearly, either.
No. Well, I just see the yellow road. We've got lots of plans. We're starting in Rotterdam and the Netherlands because they've realized that they need empathy. The Minister of Education in Costa Rica has just announced that he is going to spread roots of empathy across the entire country because he believes that they will bridge the gender gap and many of the other inequalities if children have a sense of the other, which empathy is. And then we're going to Korea. But my goal is to make friends with the federal government.
Our federal government?
Yes,
okay, gotcha.
And to go deeper. We have a presence in every province of Canada. We'd like to go deeper. And we've never asked the federal government. And we're going to be knocking on heaven's door.
We're looking out for Mary. Yes. Thank you so much. That's great. Cameron next. Hey. Cameron Kahn. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. We were worried we were going to accidentally drink each other's.
What?
We're fine.
I'm in this class.
Okay,
here.
fair enough. That's good. Okay, so as everybody else has, please tell me who you are, what's the nature of your work, and here today.
Okay, my name is Cameron Kahn. I'm an infectious disease physician and scientist. I'm based at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto. Some of you may know St. Mike's. And I'm the founder and CEO of a social enterprise that founded in 2013 to just be really brief to fight and prevent and prepare for dangerous global outbreaks.
So what was the genesis of this innovation that you're driving?
So in a sense, it was somewhat unstated. So I went through my training in medicine and came back to Toronto in early 2003, just before, some of you may remember, the SARS epidemic was 15 years ago, actually at this very time. And we didn't really even know what was coming our way, and this had a profound impact. This was really a tiny virus that crippled a city of millions of people for about 4 months. One of my colleagues got SARS, and you really saw what psychological effects it had. Also, we had a travel advisory against all non-essential travel to Toronto that led to billions in economic losses. So this was a very big event, and I think for me it really captured the fact that we live in a very small world today, and like it or not, we're kind of all in this together.
So how is your work changing things then? Like for most of us, when we hear big data, we get stressed out, Facebook and Google and the conversations around the data is used. So what good is big data doing in this story?
We'd like to think that the data that we're using here is actually being used in a positive way to benefit society. We're using very, very diverse sources of data. As one example, we work with the private sector in an anonymized way. Since we collect over 4 billion flight itineraries of travelers moving around the world. We connect that with information and news about outbreaks happening around the world. We combine it with satellite data and imagery, and use that to try and understand where diseases are appearing, where they may go, so we can be a step ahead. So I think, we're always very careful and very thoughtful. I mean, as a physician, I took an oath to do no harm. And so we think about this all the time in the work that we're doing, making sure that there's a huge opportunity with data to share insights, but let's make sure that we're not hurting people or causing harm actually in the process.
The white hat of big data, yes.
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 Yeah.
So personally, did you always know you were going to end up where you are right now? Like, where did you start out, and did it just happen that you sort of found this, or what happened?
I think part of it is there was the words perseverance and tenacity, I think, was just realizing that there was a gap. I think after SARS concluded, I realized, let's not do that again. That was kind of my first thoughts. And really just started thinking a little differently about how could we actually build a system, an early warning system that actually would be available for the world to use to try and prepare for and get ahead of these types of threats. So I had the good fortune of running into people at Mars Discovery District, Mars Innovation. I don't come from a business background or a commercialization background, but ultimately to translate some of the discoveries from my research into digital technologies, I needed a mechanism to do that. And so I've been fortunate to have a number of different people and organizations support me in that path.
So what's next for you? Because clearly, there's more work in this organization is acting, and I guess the logical question would be to ask you, are we ready for another SARS, and what happens when it happens?
Yeah, so I guess I'm going to say, and not to cause any undue concern, but I would say, no, I don't think we're quite ready yet. I think we are getting closer to being ready. But the types of threats that we're facing are very disparate. We could be dealing with the Ebola outbreak. We could be dealing with disease we've never seen. And every single one of those requires a unique combination of data, unique insights to be able to counter those threats. In terms of what's next for us, we're actively working on building what we're calling a global early warning system using diverse global data. And this is something that is really on the horizon for us. I think I'm very excited to think this is not 10 years away. This is maybe 3 or 4 years away.
Wow, it's incredible. Well, thank you for sharing that, and we'll bring you back up for the panel in just a moment. Thank you. That's great. Dr. Chu, you're next. I think I've practiced this wonderful woman's name 60 times today in an effort to say it properly.
You're right.
I'm right. I'm okay.
Yep.
Welcome.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
Good.
Good. So the work that you do is extraordinary. I hear the word Ebola and I have pure panic about it. And I honestly have a hard time understanding folks who want to be next to it, work with it constantly every day. It's terrifying. Well, it's dangerous, isn't it? It's very.
It is.
So beyond being brave and brilliant, how did you end up here? Tell me about who you are and your work and what led you here today.
Okay. My name is Xiangguo Qiu. I'm the head of vaccine development and antiviral therapy section in Special Pathogens, National Microbiology Lab, Public Health Agency of Canada in Winnipeg, Manitoba.
That's great. And you've been at this for how long?
I joined the lab actually 2003.
2003.
Yeah, so over 15 years.
And your colleague is currently abroad fighting the Ebola virus right now.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's Gary Carpenter. Right now he is contain the current Ebola outbreak. For myself, actually starting the work, actually because that and people thought Ebola could be weaponized as by region, could cause a public health event. So after that, and several countries in Western, including Canada, USA, and UK, and also Australia. So they form a MCMC consortium. So basically developing antibacterial medical countermeasures. Sorry. So we got funding from Department of Defense of Canada, and for developing vaccine and treatment. So that's what how the work started. And so since then, basically, we're starting working on this virus, developing the vaccine and the treatment. So for over 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
In fact, there was a moment, you remember, it was impossible to think of a vaccine for Ebola, right? So, and you yourself, you've been to, did you say Congo or somewhere, you've been to Africa yourself, suited up out there, trying to outspeed this disease, right?
That's correct. Actually, back home in the lab, I'm working on the Canada only biosafety level for the health containment lab, and the daily work in home, and we suit up and working in level 4. And I did went West Africa, actually Sierra Leone, in end of 2014 to help contain the Ebola outbreak there.
Are we getting close to being able to beat this thing? I mean, you guys, you can outrace it now if you get to people.
Yes, we are racing, with the virus, and I can say up to now, the vaccine and both vaccine and the treatments is near to the licensure, so will be commercially available hopefully soon. But it certainly is proved that both are working, and so especially for this outbreak, right now from WHO has deployed. I just saw the news. My colleague sent me 7,000 doses and to vaccinate the health workers first for this current outbreak, starting next week.
7,000.
Yeah, and then over 8,000 more doses will be deployed, soon.
That's amazing. Those people that you're saving their lives with those doses.
Right.
That's
incredible.
incredible.
So you want to prepare health workers, to avoid they get the disease, so they can doing the work continuously. Just not like last time. There's so many health workers get infected, and a lot of them died.
I'm sure the health workers who are getting that vaccine are very grateful for the work that you've done. Thank you very much. We'll bring you back up for the panel in a moment.
Thank you.
And now, finally, we'll bring up the team from Memorial University. All three of you. Yes. I'm going to give them an extra couple minutes. It seemed fair, so we'll do that. Yes? Hello. 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 Oh, please be careful not to fall off the back. Yeah. That would be really bad. I got you. I'm that kind of host. I like to prepare people to not fall off.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, you get to go last. Pole position is good. All right. So let's, if you could introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about the work that you've done as a team to get here today.
I'm Kathy Hodgkinson. I'm a genetic counsellor and a clinical epidemiologist.
That's great.
And are we going to introduce ourselves?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Sean Connors. I'm a cardiologist in St. John's, Newfoundland.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Terry Lynn Young. I'm a molecular geneticist working in St. John's, Newfoundland.
Okay, so now tell me about the research. How did you guys end up here today? Tell us a little bit about it.
This has been a long journey. I think we've been together actually longer than a lot of marriages, which is
That says a lot. That's good.
But Newfoundland, because of its history, has a lot of some genetic diseases and not many of others. So it's not that every genetic disease is prevalent there. But there are some that are. And one of the clear types of diseases we were seeing were diseases that ran in families. The first symptom was death, very young people dropping dead who could have had negative clinical tests shortly before their death. And it was obvious it was genetic. So we could see it running across the generations. We could see it being passed to child. We knew that because of geneticists just look at patterns, that this was a dominant disease. It was a 50% risk to a child of a parent with it. So clearly the risks for any child of a parent were 1 in 2. You don't get a much higher risk than that. Yeah. So it became very clear that we had to A, look after these patients, and B, find the gene that was responsible, and C, try and treat what was going on. So when we started this, as I say, 20 years ago.
Dramatic disease, obviously. I mean, and Newfoundland is a small place, so I mean, this kind of stuff that really, affects everybody. Yes. I was reading in some of the background before meeting you guys, and there's a particular story of how you convinced one of your colleagues to come and work on this project. I love it. I'm hoping you can tell this crowd the same story, if you would indulge us.
Well, I'll start, but I'll pass it on.
Fair enough. Okay.
So I was pulling together pedigrees, and Sean and I were working together to look after the patients. And Terry came back from her postdoc in Seattle, and we had collaborators, but the collaborators were not local. And it's very important, I think, when doing research to have proximity. So you'd like to have your research colleagues close, for many reasons. One is then you can, easily find them when they don't want to be found. I mean, that's positive. But the other important thing was that I knew that Terry was one of the best molecular geneticists I think, Newfoundland has ever produced. And she absolutely knew what she was doing with DNA. It's very complex, and she was very anal about the data. So I asked her, would you take on the molecular genetics of these cardiac diseases? And she said, well, I've got a hearing loss to do. My lab is full. So I said, please. And she said, no. So
and you can see how they arrived at marriage, right? This is the analogy.
Okay. Perhaps I can
you
take
interject
over.
Now.
So I said no, and I kept saying no for about 9 to 10 months, I guess. This was back in spring of 2003. I had external funding for several different projects, and I had a young and busy lab. I knew how critical it was that the team find the gene. They had other collaborations. I just thought perhaps it's just taking a little time. So Kathy being Kathy, and all of us being subjected to Kathy over the past couple of decades, I get a call on a Friday afternoon, and it was in January. It was snowing outside, and it was from the morgue. Came up on my phone, and it was from Kathy. So put those two together, and I knew this was not going to be a good afternoon for me. So anyway, I go down to the morgue with a very heavy heart and just shrugging my feet along. And I go in, and there's Kathy and the provincial coroner. And in between them on a steel table is what looked to me to be a heart, but a quite unhealthy heart. And Kathy said, do you know what this is? And I said, yes, I think it's a heart, but half of it is nice and healthy and red, and the other looks fat and flabby. She said, this is the heart of a 43-year-old man who died in front of his children over the weekend in his driveway. She said, are you this project or not? So with that, I said, yes. I started to cry, and I turned on my heels and left. And then I knew that, it was the urgency that, I had to start to change what I was doing in the lab. I had to find the resources, the money, the funding to get this up and running quickly, and that I couldn't, that's how I got involved, reluctantly, but here I am. And I would have never thought I would be here.
Persistence, yes. Teamwork, yes. And Dr. Connors, tell me, we all know, fast forward, you found the gene. Amazing. And the world noticed, clearly. And so let's talk about the humans, though. So Dr. Connors, talk to us about the human impact of your teamwork on this project.
This has always been about, and will always be about, the patients, right? Front and center. And when I think back about the 20-year collaboration that we've had, why we've had success, because we've had a team with players with expertise in all different areas, from the legislation, ethical viewpoint, to molecular genetics, to the clinical aspect, that, you know, we didn't stop this journey when we found the gene. And many other groups around the world, when they find the gene, they herald that's the success. And sometimes the story stops there. But for us, it was about the patient in front of us. They had 3 children. They didn't know who had the gene. Someone had to be treated. 50% of these men were dying before they got to 40 with sudden death as their first presenting feature. I mean, we couldn't stop the story there. So we were able to then bring that forward and then deploy it to the point that with the intervention from the innovation that we were able to discover, that we could add, on average, 31 years of life to the males that were in these studies. So there's very few things I know of in the clinical world of medicine where any pill or drug or scheme can add 31 years of life to a young man. But this is what we were able to bring to Newfoundland. And, you know, it's not just a Newfoundland disease. This has global implications. So wherever you are in the world now, if they suspect your family has inherited some inborn electrical error, they'll test you for this gene, because this gene didn't occur in Newfoundland. We found it in Newfoundland, but it's everywhere. And as we publish this, we get reports that come in from Spain and from Norway and Denmark and New Zealand and the US. And so, you know, it was there, but you know, people weren't looking for this gene because it was mixed among everything else. So there are some things about this that I'm particularly proud of, and that's one of them, that the patients are first and foremost, and that we've been able to assemble a team that's not stopped at the bench, you know, but we've brought it forward to deploy to patients and their well-being.
It's a lot of dads sticking around for a lot more birthdays.
It affects
right?
women too.
What's that?
It affects women too.
Yeah, incredible. I'm already out of time with you guys, and we could talk all day. We will talk more on the panel. Congratulations. Okay. Thank you. It's wonderful. Go back over here. All right. So, merci à tous les lauréats de partager avec nous leurs histoires de succès et de créativité. Ça nous a enrichis de savoir qu'il y a toujours des enjeux à surmonter avant de pouvoir nous asseoir sur cette scène. Thank you to all the laureates for sharing their personal success with us today and the adventures that got you here. We can all learn from your experience. It's profound, it's important, and you are innovation sitting in front of us. So I'd like for all of you to join us here up on the stage, and if our good friends from Memorial could send one person up? Whoever wants to be the talker. Okay. They're all so interesting, it's impossible to choose, obviously, but we'll let them fight it out, and then you guys come up. We'd like to hear about your unique perspectives on Canadian innovation and the impact that you can make by being innovative in this country. So please, join us up here. We'll invite our laureates up. And yes, please don't fall back down. Wonderful. Yes? Okay, great. Okay, so I think maybe I'll come down here with this. So before this event started, we were talking about the word innovation. We use the word innovation, what it means. So I'd like to start there. Let's start with the word innovation. What do you think it is at its core, existentially? What is innovation to you? Tom, we'll start with you.
Well, I think innovation inherently is creativity, but not just creativity, but it has to bring value, whether it be a business process, a new way of doing things, cost savings, whatever it may be. There has to be a value attached to that creativity.
Okay, value. Okay, Ernie?
I think it's a better way of doing things. Really not inventing the wheel per se, but more taking something and improving it and actually making it work, seeing it to the end.
Mary?
I think innovation really is about imagination and creativity, having also the empathic capacity to understand what the problem is, who is having a problem, who's dropping dead, who's getting Ebola, being able to connect with the problem and use your imagination and creativity to approach it from a new angle. But I think empathy is really part of the identification of innovation.
Caring about the problem and understanding it, yeah? Yeah.
I think I'm just going to echo the really just better. So in that sense, we're all innovators. We have the opportunity to do things better. The one part to me that I think feels like it's an important part of the way I think of innovation is it intrinsically involves taking a certain degree of risk.
Excellent.
I think innovation is to carry novel things or novel approach to solve the problem that's currently not exist. In my case, just develop vaccines or treatment for this high consequence pathogens like Ebola, Marburg, Lassa.
That's great.
Yeah.
Great. Go ahead.
I think I don't have to add just to say that I think part of it is vision, that you can envision something better. I think that's important. I think it's also important to be brave. I think in many cases in our particular project, we had to go do things that weren't really done or okay to do. And we had to question why that is, and then, and say, well, actually we're going to try it a new way. And then see who you can gather around to support it. And so I just echo what the other laureates said, but anyone can do that, really. And I think some people see in a very way, and the other will actually see a solution. Mm-hmm. And I think, when you see a solution or you see a don't even see, then I think that's an important time to step up.
It's interesting watching this group before this panel. They've become friends today, and you can kind of see why, right? They're all designed in a very similar way to sort of drive this culture. And you are. It makes sense, innovation as you describe it. Before I came here today, I was telling friends I get to do this today, and I was super lucky to do it. And they're like, wow, these guys are so smart. I'm like, yeah, they are. I don't think I could ever do that, is mostly what people said to me. I said, that's interesting. These guys all put their pants on one leg at a time, right? But I mean, the idea that it would be too difficult to do is something I think we need to attack. So, you've all failed, I'm guessing. I've also failed a million times. So tell us about that moment where you were like, this is never going to happen. And tell us how you got to the other side of it. You want to start?
Sure. I think failure, is a necessary step along. Churchill, who said, success is going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. And I think that's pretty much the journey of anyone who's accomplished anything substantial is having to fail along the way. And something important that I like to keep in mind, and I always tell my own students, is that we're all ordinary people. Or at least I'm speaking on my behalf here. So I'm not speaking on behalf of all the laureates, but I'm an ordinary person. My family reminds me all the time how dumb I am. But Jean Vanier, who's the founder of L'Arche, a home for people with developmental disabilities, he said that we're not called to do, we're ordinary people called to do things with extraordinary love. Mm-hmm. And that's what I tell my students. If you have to exhibit that extraordinary love, and then you'll be able to accomplish great things.
That's awesome.
I think it's constantly reframing. You learn from where you're faltering or what's not connecting the dots, and it's just constantly reframing. And being really resilient. The people in my culture are resilient. They're still here today. When they try to make them be a part of distinct. So us it was there's a better way. There's always a better way, and so we're used to this, and so we're used to just identifying. We're very solution oriented, and I think everybody sitting here is very solution oriented. Mm. We pinpoint the issue and then really go from there. Mm. And just one step, and sometimes it's 2 steps back, but we're moving forward. We have to move forward.
Mm. Thank you. Mary?
Well, I come from a philosophy, a scaling philosophy of strategic serendipity. So if you think that you're capitalizing on serendipity, you just opened the wrong door. So I think it's about allowing yourself permission, being good to yourself, being empathic to yourself, and working with a drop-dead team. That's a terrible phrase.
You have, in defense, you've been a lot of time together today, so it's okay. We'll forgive you, Mary. It's all right.
But I think with is really important. I think building a team that will support one another so that you don't feel it's your personal failure, that you as a team can try a different way is really important. Then you don't get too discouraged.
That's beautiful. That's cool. I'm going to remember that. Okay, go ahead.
I'm just going to say I think the word failure gets a bad rap in the sense that the connotation of the word makes it sound like the person who has failed or the team that has failed in some way is a failure, and that's definitely not the case, that this is an inevitable part of progression, an inevitable part of learning. The two are completely tied together. Just like a personal story, I'll say, one of the great joys I had was teaching my kids how to ride a bicycle. That was a few years ago, and one of my boys, I will leave him somewhat anonymous. I only have two, but he asked me if I could write down all the instructions so that when he rode a bike that he wouldn't fall. And I said, it just doesn't really work that way. You're going to actually have to fall. But I said, once you learn how to do this, your life will be forever changed. You will be able to go and do things that you've never imagined possible. And so don't think of it as failure. I recognize there will be tears and it will hurt our ego and it will hurt perhaps physically if you're falling off a bike. But this is the inevitable part of learning how to do something transformative. So I think we tend to think of failure in a negative sense rather than as part of the path of doing something more important. And I think we often internalize it as a reflection of us rather than as part of the process of discovery.
Innovation is failure then, yes?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
That's cool.
Well, as a research scientist, and one of my friends, we talk about, one day he said, do you know what research means? It's search, and search again. Yeah, so which means, what we go through, fail, then you may succeed. So yeah, we always say, failure will be the mother of success. So yeah, I have telling myself that fail is normal, and don't be afraid of. You just learn from your failure, and then you will be success in the end.
That's great. That's great. You get to go last.
So I think one of the big challenges as a research scientist is to keep your team together and keep the funding going. And in terms of failures that really hurt, I think it's applying for funding, spending months putting together what you think is the most brilliant application ever, and then it comes back, you didn't get it. And so that was an experience early in our team. We had applied for a CIHR team grant, and we had done a stellar job, but we had made a couple of mistakes, and one of them was describing our team cardiologist as sort of a user of the data, and there was a few other small things that I thought were small. But of course, and that was my fault, and it had a huge impact because all of a sudden we had a gap in funding. However, we also, other people in our community, both the patients, the families, and the institutions, knew what we were trying to do, and I had George Power from MCOA. It's not bad. Maybe we can go for funding, look at the AIF, the Atlantic Innovation Fund, and through the support of a community and through others recognizing failure and how much that actually meant to the team, we had the community come together, and we eventually did get it funded. But funding is a huge challenge because without it, there's very little opportunity to advance. So yes, we've had tons of failures.
Yeah. I mean, you need the money to fuel the system, yes, and I think all of you have had experience with that as well. It's fascinating. So we're going to take some questions now from the folks, the good folks in the room. Vous pouvez nous demander en français, je peux traduire en anglais pour nos lauréats, si vous voulez. C'est à vous à décider. So yeah, let's take some questions. Who would like to go first? We have a roving mic at the back. Be innovative. Yes, you can do it. Yes, Mr. Denham will start. Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Cameron, you mentioned your two children. I've got this for a room of I don't know, baby kids, grade 9 kids. What are some of the things you'd share with them in terms of the lessons you've learned to help them kind of find their passion, feel their passion?
So, should I start? Yeah. I think, with respect to what gets you up every day and gets you going to work every day is your passion for what you're doing. So, I often tell my team, just remember in the mechanics second. Sometimes we can kind of reverse them and do them and think about it in the opposite direction. Because ultimately, if you're really passionate about something, you're going to look at perhaps innovative or unconventional ways to approach the problem. And that passion really sustains you because, as Tom mentioned, the Churchill quote about success being essentially moving from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. I mean, you have those ups and downs, and you've got to continue and persevere through them. So I think really what I would say is that your passion is at the root of all the work that you do. If you are deeply connected to it and to the cause and to the mission, that I think you're going to be successful. I think there's actually an Albert Schweitzer quote about that as well, and essentially success comes from happiness, not really the other way around. So I think some of the things I would share.
Did you want to take a pass at it, Tom?
The only thing I would add is I would tell, if it was a group of grade 8s, to just go crazy with your ideas. I think as adults, we oftentimes put up barriers to innovation, and we're set in our ways. We're comfortable doing things a certain way. It's safe. It's something we can control. But just let them run with it. Go crazy.
Ernie, what do you think?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, dream, like just don't stop. And I think the best thing that we can do is just guide questions. Just make sure that they fully understand and where they want to be, and it's their journey, and we're just here to help them along that journey.
Mary?
I think so often the way kids are treated in school of that age, they answer questions only because they're trying to hit the target, and their voice isn't heard. So it requires really intrinsic motivation in order to be able to get to your dream and to say, to heck with the others, this is what I feel. But if you haven't had opportunities to speak, you don't know your voice, you don't know your personal power. And I think one of the things we need to do in education is stop teaching to the test and allow kids to find their dreams and to articulate their dreams and to be non-judgmental as adults, rather than always kids have to be on outcome.
Yeah, education is very important, and we should educate all kids. They find their dream and to be passionate, and then you can really go after what you want and you want to do.
That's great. Want to take a pass at it too? Yeah.
Sure. So I would say I would sort of build on the communication message. I think whether you're 8 years old or 80, I think visions of a single individual. There are actually things we want to do as a community and a society and a country. Cure Ebola, be able to track when the next outbreak going to be able to put an ICD in somebody who's actually at risk. And so even as a child, if you start to communicate what your dreams are, I think you'll actually find you build a community of others who are dreaming those same dreams. And perhaps that actually both reinforce your own and keep reinforcing the fact that your dreams do matter, and they matter not just to you but to many other people.
I suspect those grade A kids would probably be inspired by your path. It's pretty cool and it's hard to ignore. So I think we could probably fit in one more question before we have to wrap things up. Go ahead.
As innovators, you need time to be creative. And I know time is a premium these days, particularly in academia. So how can Canada help free up your time, maybe from other duties, so that you can be more creative and innovative?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think the invention of the office computer has been a wonderful thing. But I think what's happened over the years is many things that used to be done by administrative assistants, are now downloaded to professors. So we write all our own letters, all our own emails. We now have to take care of, for the most part, all our own accounting on grants. And so you become that most of your time is not only just teaching and mentoring and collaborating with your peers, but you spend an awful lot of time doing tasks that I think could probably better be done by other people who are skilled at those things. If you ever want to feel pain, just watch me type out a letter or an email. It takes me forever, especially letters. And I do a lot of that. So I often think, what a waste of my time when someone else could do that much better. And I think this has happened. We've downloaded a lot of things to professors, and it's not the best use of our time. And we need to spend more time with our students and our trainees and mentoring and collaborating together.
And I think there's a similarity between academics and the not-for-profit charity sector in that there's an expectation that you're super people, that you deliver, but there's no understanding of the infrastructure that's required to deliver. So you're wasting your time on things you're not good at, and the things that you particularly would be able to change the world around get second shrift. So I think it's a fabulous question, and I sure would like to hear some answers.
Did you want to? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add that I think because creativity it's not a linear type of task like, typing out a letter or writing an email. It's something that has to percolate. I tend to use my walk to and from work every day as that time that's free of emails and, and to kind of think. But I do think that this is a really important issue as people become more and more constrained with tasks that don't really allow them to play to their strengths. I mean, if we're going to be successful as a country, everyone's going to need to play to their strengths, and that means do what you can uniquely do that no one else can. And that's going to mean all the things that perhaps maybe you're not the best person to do, that perhaps we have others who can actually help support that. But in a constrained fiscal, become very, very difficult, and really got to just take on everything. So I do think time and creativity are very much linked to one another. So we are going to have to figure out how to tackle this challenge.
Go ahead.
You mentioned how we had all bonded.
Yes.
Do you know what we bonded over?
Tell me all of it. Tell me everything.
How exhausted we all are.
Oh my God. That's
and we
terrible.
We're all deliriously happy. But the thing is, our families are with us, and we also bonded over the fact that we punish our families. And we feel guilty about the time we our family, our passion. Not that they're not our passion, but we have competing passions. So question.
I bet you have an answer to this too, yes.
I'm super elite. You know what that means?
Did you say super elite? Oh, yes. I fly a lot too. I'm right there with you. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Points are good.
Yeah, so. Try not to be. No, it's the time away from family that's the price. And but what we've seen in happening on the ground is really worth it.
You have to ask your family that.
Yeah.
Tom, do you want to jump in, Tom?
I think some of the exhaustion that the other laureates are talking about in the time sink is because many of us spend inordinate amounts of time raising money. I probably spend about 40% of my time raising funds, whether it be through grants or through philanthropic sources. I mean, those relationships take time to cultivate. I mean, it's an inordinate amount of energy. And if I could have that time back, I could be doing lots of useful things.
I want to see if I can get Dr. Cho in there. Do you feel the same about?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, right now, I spend a lot of my time to reply emails, communication, for funding, all those kind of work. And if one day I go to level 4, really do work, I was so happy.
Yeah. Did you want to have a final comment?
I was going to say, I think this issue about time, clearly you can tell we have a lot to say about it.
We hit a nerve.
Time is one of those unique resources. It's non-renewable. You cannot get it back. And everything else, or financial resources and so forth, can be repleted. But I also think that there is an element for each of us to have to make time, to make choices about what is important, which includes spending time with people. Everything we do in one way or another is about relationships with others. And so I think sometimes it's easy to let other things take priority, but ultimately, and this is notwithstanding all of the challenges that we've heard, but sometimes I think, and I find myself just having to say this, my kids will come to me and say, I want your attention. And I have to kind of put everything down and say, okay, you've got it. I'm going to put this aside. So I think that's also a challenge as we look to try and disrupt and do things differently, that we also have to make sure that we are making time for what is most important.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of time, we are very much at time. I wanted to thank you all. Rest assured that your comments and thoughts today, the warmth and the passion that you brought to your answers, and every second you spent here with us was gratefully appreciated by every member of this audience and everybody on the internet watching today. Thank you. Thank you for your work and your innovation. You are changing this country, and we are grateful for it, and we appreciate your time today. So thank you. So that brings us to the end of the event, but before everybody leaves, I'd like to invite up Barbara Gibson to the stage. She is the Director of Innovation at the Rideau Hall Foundation and brings 20 years of experience in the public service of Canada to the Rideau Hall Foundation. And Barbara's career spans policy, communications, and corporate roles at the Office of the Secretary to the Governor General, Transport Canada, Finance Canada, and most recently as Director General at Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada. Please help me welcome Barbara to the stage.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of our laureates. It is such an honor to be part of today and to be able to participate in an event like this. De la part de la Fondation de Rideau Hall et du Forum de politique publique, j'aimerais féliciter encore une fois tous les gagnants. You are truly among the best and the brightest this country has to offer, and hearing your stories in person has been nothing short of inspiring. I do think in the next tranche of the Governor General's Innovation Awards, we will have a special category for either time turners or for email innovations. So we'll add that to it. I would like to recognize, first and foremost, the Office of the Secretary to the Governor General and Her Excellency Julie Payette, who are key partners in the Governor General's Innovation Awards, and with whom we work extremely closely to ensure that we are able to have these awards each year and to recognize outstanding Canadians. We are very happy to have partnered once again with Public Policy Forum to have this special public event to celebrate the awards. And to have a bit of an additional conversation here about how we support a conversation on innovation in Canada. We thank you very much, Julie, and your team for leadership in this regard. À la Fondation Rideau Hall, une de nos priorités est de soutenir une culture d'innovation au Canada. We work very closely with partners across the country to celebrate amazing Canadian innovations, to connect innovators and future innovators, and to cultivate innovation among the next generation. One reason that we were able to do that is thanks to our partners, and we'd like to thank, along with Public Policy Forum, we'd like to thank our partners and innovation champions for their contributions to making this work possible. Specifically, we'd like to thank Government of Canada and Innovation Science Economic Development Canada and Employment and Social Development Canada, Thomson Reuters, Power Corporation of Canada, Facebook, the Globe and Mail, BDC, and Michael, thank you so much for your contributions today. Mr. John Risley, Mr. Tom Jenkins, and Mr. Blake Goldring. Without these individuals and these organizations, we would not be here today. So we thank all of you very much for your support. With the support of these kinds of partners, we're able to celebrate Canadians and make Canada and tell stories about how Canada is the go-to country for innovation in the world. Nous sommes fiers d'avoir lancé la première semaine de l'innovation canadienne. We are very proud to have launched Canadian Innovation Week, build on the work of the Governor General's Innovation Award to recognize Canada's culture. Once again, I would like to thank all of you here today for the support of our laureates. Laureates, thank you for making the time. I know it's a wonderful event to be recognized, but it's also very wonderful that you take the time to share your stories with us. So thank you all.
You're done. You can go and do innovative things. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.